Hey guys, welcome to another live stream. This is the first episode of the Unbiased in Purple podcast, hosted by me, Purple Political Talk, and my good friend UEP. UEP?
Hello, I am here. Hi.
Yeah. So this is going to be a podcast we're going to be doing. We currently have not decided the time frame we're going to do like specifically, but we will eventually give you guys the amount of time that we will do it for every specific amount of time. But this is our first episode. This is our premiere episode, and today we have a very interesting episode, right, UEP?
Yeah, we've got a lot to talk about.
So yeah, there's a lot of things we're going to talk about. I think that the one of the big things we're going to get into this stream, is getting into the midterms. But before that, I want to get into with our agenda of what we're going to be talking about today. So you guys at home are you guys are going to know what we're going to talk about. So first thing is we're going to discuss the discussion we're going to have amongst me and UEP, and then later in around maybe 20 minutes we're going to open up the Q&A chat section so you guys could ask questions and everything. So it's very interactive, and we can really interact with you guys, because that's one of the big things we wanted to do when we made this live podcast, is have that podcast element where we discuss and interact while still having that element of discussion with people in the chat. So let's see. I'm going to start by introducing our topic and the midterm elections that are coming up in 2022. So UEP, as it looks right now, what would you say about the 2022 midterms? Do you think that it's going to be something that's going to be very positive for the Democrats? Do you think they're going to have a so-so year, or the Republicans are just might have a wave year in 2022?
Yeah, so 2022 is going to be a year, or at least a midterm, that I think we have not seen a midterm like 2022 in a very long time. I think the only thing that we can compare it to even closely would be 2002, where we had the Republicans gained a couple seats in the House, I believe, and they netted one seat in the Senate, because prior to that, we had a similar situation where we had a 50-50 tie in the Senate, with the Republican vice president gaining essentially
Control.
giving that vote to the GOP that would have been breaking ties. And then a year later, they gained one seat. It was a very good map for them. It wasn't really a wave. They just gained a seat that they were expected to gain, and it was pretty much that. Now, in the House of Representatives, the Republicans gained 8 seats, I just checked, in 2002, which I don't think the Democrats are going to gain 8 seats, being realistic. And we can talk about the House in a second, but the Senate is a more realistic target for the Democrats to gain in, mostly because the map is more favorable to them. You can essentially identify 4 key Republican pickup opportunities in the Senate for 2022, which would be Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, and New Hampshire. And those situations rely, in my opinion, entirely on who they run. The Democrats have already, I think, a really solid opportunity where they'd be favored in Pennsylvania. They've got another good shot in Wisconsin, and they have North Carolina as well to be their third target if Sherry Beasley turns out to be the good candidate they think that she's going to be. They also have some, unlikely potential pickups, like seats that could flip but probably won't, like Ohio. I know political talk, some state of Florida. And there are states that, they have maybe a 5% chance of winning if the right circumstance comes up in, Missouri, where the Republicans have a couple bad candidates that could potentially run there. The Republicans also have some seats like that. And by the way, Alaska is another one that the Democrats could potentially pick up if Lisa Murkowski and Kelly Toshiba end up in a really nasty primary where we have a 3-way race that could get really messy there. The Republicans have a couple more seats they can potentially pick up. Colorado, if Michael Bennet has a scandal, could come into play. We could potentially see Larry Hogan running in Maryland, which I don't think he's going to, but if he did, that seat would become a little more competitive. But realistically, in my opinion, I think that the Republicans have 4 targets that they're looking at. The Democrats have 3, but the Democrats, I think, are favored right now because their 3 targets are more winnable than any of the Republicans' 4 as of right now.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at this midterm and you generalize the whole, where is it going to lean? Is it going to be a wave? It's going to be a little tide. What is it going to be like? I think is a very hard midterm to tell. I think that the Republicans certainly do have momentum in certain parts of the country. There's always party fatigue. Usually, the midterm after your first term, after your first election, is usually one of the worst midterms you do have, or well, it's one of the 2 that you could have, but it's usually one of the worst election years for down ballot races. So for the incumbent party. So when you look at this and say, well, where do the Democrats and the Republicans currently stand? I mean, the Democrats, they do have currently a somewhat of a benefit when it comes to the map, at least when it comes to the U.S. Senate. They are not defending as many seats as the Republicans are. And that's something that's going to be very difficult for the Republicans, I think, moving on in the U.S. Senate. As for the House of Representatives, I really think that the GOP is going to have a smoother ride to majority just based off one, redistricting, which I know you've been closely covering. And then the other thing is the rise of these new GOP candidates, especially GOP women, who are coming in and they're going in and going up and bringing up a lot of this Republican support in areas that before or traditionally would not vote Republican. So I think that's something that's going to end up helping the Republican Party. I think that the one thing that certainly might be of momentum for the Republicans is just Biden and his inability sort of not to cover in a certain way. What I really think is that Biden really hasn't began to govern hard and implement the policies that really are going to be changing America's perceptions of him in the way enough to win him and his party is such a big election. Trump had his tax cuts he could brag about, and he had other issues. You see, Biden doesn't have that polarization, or he doesn't have that marquee thing. I mean, most people are just going to pinpoint to the economy and stimulus checks and things like that. But I think that is kind of where we're looking at as when it comes to generalizing it. So, UAP, do you want to tell me a little bit more about some governor's races you think could be very interesting? Because I think, and also kind of talk about why governor races are not the big indicator for nationwide races.
All right, so first, we have to remember that governor's races do not really reflect the national environment. I think that we're going to see some really weird governor's races because they're not nationalized. They're not races that have consequences at the federal level, especially in a year where redistricting's just happened and the governors are not going to have power or any influence whatsoever over redistricting because it'll be past redistricting. So, yeah. Now, there are a couple of governor's races that I think we should be looking at. So, just that I don't mess anything up, I'm actually going to pull up the map on YAPMS.com. But I think that each party kind of has one pickup that I think that they're going to have basically locked in, I guess. So for the Democrats, that's Maryland. Larry Hogan, not term limited, so that's a state that they're definitely going to win. I say that with full confidence. This is a race that would only be winnable for the GOP if Hogan ran again. And unfortunately for the Republican Party, the country is too polarized for someone not named Larry Hogan to win Maryland. I think we all know why. So Maryland, probably a Democratic pickup there. But the Republicans, I think that they're probably going to win Kansas back. It's not as it's closer than Maryland, because I do think that Laura Kelly being an incumbent running again in a state that Kansas is more competitive than Maryland, generally speaking. So we could always see Kansas staying blue, but I'm gonna guess that it flips to the Republican Party, especially because of how polarized the environment in the country is right now, and because Laura Kelly, unfortunately, does not have the approval ratings that other Democrats have in other red states, like John Bel Edwards in Louisiana, very high approval rating with both Republicans and Democrats. Andy Beshear in Kentucky. These Steve Bullock back when he was the governor of Montana. So that's just to put it out there that Kelly, not as popular as other red state Democrats. Can she win? Sure, wouldn't be favored, and I think she's going to lose like between 5 and 7%. And someone in the chat just said Jeff Collier will win. I think Collier's going to win. He actually ran in the 2018 Republican primary, and he ended up losing that primary by like 600 votes. It was really close. And then Chris Kobach, as we know, very, very, very bad candidate for the GOP. He actually, I think most of us know this, but in the 2020 Senate race, he was actually running for Senate. And I know me and Purple were back, that was almost a year ago now, talking about that race. Both of us, I think, had the race as a toss-up if Kobach got the nomination because he lost the governor's race by over 5%. And, Mitch McConnell literally went to Kansas and he said, don't vote for Roger Marshall. We don't want to make this race more competitive than it has to be. And then Marshall won the Senate race by like 11%. So Kansas, long story short, probably going to stay with the GOP, but I think Kelly has maybe a 20% chance of winning.
I think Kansas is one of the interesting races. And, today I did a gubernatorial prediction and I made a huge mistake because I put Massachusetts safe blue because I completely forgot about Charlie Baker. It's like one of those things, when you're filling in the maps and stuff and you start like doing predictions, you sometimes forget. And this is the first gubernatorial prediction I've done for 2022. So I forgot about Charlie Baker in Massachusetts. So then I looked in like an idiot, but then it kind of proves the point even more that the governor races really matters more of what an individual can appeal to a certain group of people in a state. Because, it's because of that we see some certain races that were like, what happened? Kansas was a great example of that in 2018, where, Laura Kelly, she ended up being Chris Kobach. So I think that was like one of the big examples of that. So now, as far as a lot of the party platforms, where do you think they're headed? Because I think that the Republicans are going to run in a very anti-Biden, anti-establishment movement, while the Democrats are going to have the struggles they've had for many years now, where their establishment, who has a lot of the elites in major states, with solid support within those groups of people, they're gonna start appealing to they're gonna be the battle of the elites versus the battle of the more populist AOC wing of the party. So where do you think the platforms are gonna lie?
Well, first, really quickly, there was a question in the chat. It's a question for you: would Mark Ronchetti have a good shot at winning in New Mexico governor? So Ronchetti is a solid candidate for the GOP. I think he'd win. He had a good performance against Ben Ray Lujan. Lujan ran a pretty bad campaign, didn't really actually campaign for that seat. He probably thought it was safe, and he had a scare where he won by like probably 10 points less than he expected to win by. He still won by 6 though, and Joe Biden had performance in New Mexico with Hispanics and oil workers, so I still think it would be likely D. Someone in the chat, America First Matt, said that he would have it as lean D. Not a bad rating. I just think it would be likely based on I think people tend to make races more competitive than they actually are. It's just, I guess, how we are. I've done that in the past too, but even with a good candidate like Ronchetti, New Mexico, still probably I'd say the Democrats will win it by 5 or 6%, likely Democrat. As for your question, what do you think the platforms are going to be? I think that overall, of course, platforms are going to vary, but I would say that the Democrats are going to run on a more kind of what Biden did in 2020. They didn't really, Joe Biden didn't really have a platform. His platform was kind of just, and I'm not saying that he doesn't have policy. I'm not saying he does or doesn't, but I'm saying that his platform.
Joe Biden's platform was malarkey. Stop the malarkey.
Yeah, his platform was no malarkey, and United States of America, not divided States of America, which isn't a bad, not a bad way to run. I mean, he's now president, so he did run a bad campaign, but it's not as inspiring, I think, to a lot of people as it really could be. So I think the Democrats, they're not going to run I think they're going to run on a very meh platform for 2022. The Republicans, and by the way, neither party, in my opinion, has figured out has figured out how to win elections consistently. Every year Democrats blow elections they should be winning, and every year Republicans blow elections they should be winning. It's keep happening forever. But yeah, no, the Republicans, I think the Republican Party is shifting to the right, especially the party leadership. Like Mitch McConnell isn't any different than he was 10 years ago, but Kevin McCarthy is a more right-wing Speaker of the House of Representatives, and a lot of, GOP leadership, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, is on a committee, and she is considered by many to be a very right-wing figure in American politics, and has tied herself to the QAnon conspiracy theories, and that's not something that is good for the GOP in the suburbs, but could, I guess, populism could do better for them in working class areas. So it really is it's going to be a pick your poison no matter what happens. But I don't really think that messaging matters as of right now. What I will say for right now is that in the 2021 governor's races, Terry McAuliffe is running a terrible campaign. I think he's not taking it very seriously and is running a very online campaign that's really boring. So I think that Virginia could get a little closer than people think, just to put it out there.
Yeah, for sure. I think that one of the big reasons why a lot of these parties end up blowing races is because they become too overconfident. I want to go back to New Mexico. I had some further thoughts after everything happened. So after everything you said, I really think New Mexico is going to end up being likely, if not safe. Probably more than likely, because you have Michelle Lujan Grisham, who is she's a Latino woman in a very Latino heavy state. She's popular. She's within the realm of popularity. Of course, she did have her scandals, and I think without a doubt you can say almost every single politician in the United States has faced a scandal at one point in her life, and I think or their lives. So you can't really pinpoint, and I've seen it in my other premieres earlier today. I saw some people pinpointing, oh, this person has a scandal, this person had a scandal. Unless it's something that is going to stick with a person forever and ever and ever and ever, I really think that you're looking at everyone's going to be on the even playing field when it comes to scandals. Because if the Democrats have scandals, Republicans have scandals, and I think you can't really pinpoint individual parties like their scandals, because both of them really have scandals. AP right here, he's saying not all politicians have scandals. Well, I really do think that all politicians have scandals. If not, they have negative coverage of media, certainly. I think that there's no way we can not see that, because I mean, even Joe Biden, who at one point seemed like this super popular figure who was bound to win the Democratic nomination by so much, he ended up losing. So scandals are really, really a thing, but it affects everyone. And UEP, if you have anything to say after this, you can, but then after that, I think we should open up to questions and things from the chat.
Right. Okay. So in just agree with PPT here, you're listing DeSantis doesn't have a scandal. He does have a scandal to a certain extent. I can give a politician that is semi well known, and I'll come up with a scandal for them. Scandals can range from big to small. The Michelle Lujan Grisham scandal, not really a big scandal. I'm dismissing. I'm not saying it's not legitimate, but I am saying not something that in a state like New Mexico it really cost her an election, cost her a ton of support. So I do think that unless it's a really big scandal, I don't think that we're going to scandals affecting politicians if we need to. There are, of course, going to be Senate races. Like I saw, I can name a bunch of them, Senate races that could be affected by scandals that politicians have, like North Carolina 2020. I think that Cal Cunningham was going to win that race until he had his scandal where he, cheated on his wife. That really hurt him with a lot of voters in North Carolina, kind of a value state. So Michelle Lujan Grisham, I don't think that it's going to cost her anything, and I think that there are, like you said, scandals too much of a player in 2022 midterms. Now, really quickly, just going to open it up to questions like PPT said. So put your question in the chat and we'll answer them like a forum.
Yeah. So I just want to mention another thing. We also have to remember something about scandals. Scandals do not necessarily have to be true, but if the perception by the people managing media, that would be pretty much corporate media. If corporate media decides to make it a scandal and cover it continuously, of course you're going to get completely screwed over. One of the things is like, AP, you mentioned that DeSantis didn't have a scandal. Well, he actually did have a scandal, but then it was just disproven by some media sources. When, 60 Minutes did a completely big hit piece on him, that was a scandal. Was it true? No, and that got figured out. These politicians are going to end up being, are going to end up being the scandals. They're going to get scandals. That's just the big thing around it. And I think whatever race you look, and if you look at any race in the past year, in any race, you have Eric Adams, you have who, not Eric Adams, Scott Stringer, who had a big scandal in his race that completely ruined his front runner status back in 2020, back in 2016, in the 2018 midterms. There's many examples. And AP, yeah, they were not true, but scandals, even though they're not true, just the general perception really might end up affecting someone. UAP also, something we forgot to mention, New York City mayoral race. Do you want to give them an update?
Sure. Sorry, I was muted for a second. My bad. So, if you haven't heard, and I'll use this as a good opportunity to pump my Instagram account. So, I do. Yeah. So my Instagram is at UEP_YouTube, but I posted around half an hour ago that Eric Adams is essentially has essentially been elected the next mayor of New York City. So I say this for a couple of reasons. First of all, we have around 3.9 thousand ballots left to be counted, according to the New York City Board of Elections. Eric Adams' lead is significantly bigger than that. I don't know the exact number. He's ahead by a point. If we look at, he's ahead, by around, he's ahead by around 9,000 votes. So it's obviously a very, very close race, but not. Catherine Garcia somehow were to win every single outstanding ballot. She would lose the race. And she also cannot request a recount because the New York City threshold for a recount is if a race is under 0.5%. She is currently by around a point. It's going to stay, essentially. I guess it's going to stay that way. So Eric Adams, been elected the mayor of New York City, 9.9%. Unless he has like a major scandal that would hurt him. But like we just talked about, it's not likely that he has a scandal. And if he does, in a 75-25 Democratic city like New York City, we would not likely see that causing anything to change. The Republicans are going to run Curtis Sliwa, who is not a bad candidate. I don't know too much about him, but he's going to lose this race. It is New York City. So Eric Adams has, I'm comfortable saying, and I call it on Instagram, he's going to be the next mayor of New York City.
Right. So that's a big thing that big political news, and we were following that race from a couple weeks ago. Finally have an answer on that, so that's great. Let's start by taking some questions.
We were live for that race,
yeah.
We were live for that race.
Yeah, I hope that most of the people were there, and I think by looking at the people who are here tonight, most of them were. I want to start by taking a question from Faisal. He asked, does Liz Cheney have a strong chance for running for president in 2028 or 2032? No. Liz Cheney, when it comes to her, first of all, she's never going to want to run for president because she doesn't want the job. I think really that's what we're looking at. She might for public stunts, but I don't think she really is an outcast in her party. Like she's a castaway in her own party, so I think that that's something that's not going to be very good for her. And if she does decide to run, her campaign is going to fail miserably because she can only appeal to a certain small group of establishment Republicans, which in the future is really going to affect her because the Republican Party is moving more populist, moving more to the right, And Liz Cheney is the epitome of establishment Republican who's staying back with the Bush era of Republicanism. It's no longer the new brand of the Republican Party, which is Trumpism, populism. So no, I don't think that she's going to have that. UEP, what do you think?
Yeah, Cheney would she'd fail. I don't think she'd get to Iowa. Her polling numbers would be atrocious. She's made, a kind of over the past 6 months a big point of criticizing Donald Trump and being a again, like you said, an establishment Republican. She is the daughter of Dick Cheney, the former vice president, and she's an establishment rep, and she doesn't really have anything to campaign on other than being a party for quite a while. But other than that, she wouldn't really campaign. I don't think that she would really win a state, and I think that if she made it to Iowa, she'd probably get 5% of the vote if she was lucky. There's another question in the chat that I won't address really quickly. Matthew Tower says, could Mandela Barnes win the Senate race if he entered? So Wisconsin's a really interesting race, and I've been really bullish on the Democrats here. This is the race that I've kind of been the odd one out on because most people have Wisconsin as a tilt to lean Republican race. And, I don't really, to be quite frank, I don't really know why, first of all, the Republicans would be favored when they have an unpopular incumbent in a Biden state in a year that, Donald Trump was the first Republican to win Wisconsin since the 1980s, right? And he ran a populist campaign twice, and he lost it the second time, despite doing historically well in working class areas, historically well in rural areas. And and I'm not saying that rural areas are going to revert to what they were in 2008. That would be ridiculous. But without Donald Trump on the ballot in Wisconsin, Republicans can't count on getting insane rural turnouts. They can't count on getting great numbers with working class voters. And that's the harsh reality for them. They might do a little better in the suburbs, but that trend has been going on for long before Trump. The working class and rural trends started with Trump, and I think that to a certain extent they're going to end with Trump. Again, like I said 2 minutes ago, the rural area is not going to revert to 2008. But what is going to happen is the Democrats are going to get better turnout for them with rural voters, and they could make minor inroads with working class voters in Wisconsin. That's why I think this race is going to be a tilt Democrat race. I do think that if Mandela Barnes ran, he'd probably win it by a point or so. Same with Sarah Godlewski. With Tom Nelson, I think I think he'd lose it by under literally maybe a 0.5%, but it would be super, super close. And actually, all the time of discussion, someone says Ron Johnson is going to win. I don't know what UEP is talking about. Okay, why is he going to win? Tell us why. Because I don't know where PBT stands in the race. It's tilted either way, but we can talk about that in a second.
I think I agree with AP. Although the Democrats could end up running, somewhat, stronger candidates in the race, I think that the general Trumpism brand of populism is still going to be there for a lot of these people. And I think it's really going to come down to a couple things. People not being happy with Biden. The state of Wisconsin being, in its weird political limbo where it's half Republican but still half Democrat. So this is one of my weird takes. This is like where something on the other ones out. I think that Wisconsin is going to go with a split ballot. I think very narrowly Tony Evers is going to win his race, and very narrowly Ron Johnson will win his race. I think that the Trump brand of the Republican Party is certainly not gone. They could still count with the Republicans. They could count with a little bit of that support. So I think that we're looking at a race where in Wisconsin, the general brand of Trumpism will still be there. And for someone like Ron Johnson, who is the incumbent and who is known around the state, famously, he's the incumbent senator, that could help him out. It's not like this is and this would be the inverse because this was a Democrat to Republican seat, but it's not like this is a Claire McCaskill where, everything went wrong for her and it just flipped because even though she was well known and stuff in the state, that's what I think this race, it could entitle, but that's a possibility. But I think that, the Republicans are probably going to still hold ground there. Let me see if you're gonna have let me
So
see some. Yeah, go
okay,
ahead.
so I disagree, and again, I know this is a hot take. I've seen three or four people, or three people, I think, in the chat have disagreed with me, and that's okay. Again, I'm not saying this race is safe Democrat or anything. Tilts are, races that could go either way, but I would think that the Democrats would be favored. People. Matthew Tower says Ron Johnson's not unpopular. His approval ratings, and again, the polls are atrocious, but his approval ratings are not good, to say the least. He's underwater, according to Civics, according to Morning Consult. You can look at a ton of polls. He's trailing, Tom Nelson, I think, is a subpar candidate for Wisconsin Democrats. In a poll, he was trailing Tom Nelson by 4%. That's not a good sign for him. Again, you shouldn't be making predictions off polls, but with the limited polling that we do have, Ron Johnson is not a popular senator. He also votes in his rhetoric. It's like he's from Alabama. He votes as a staunch conservative. And, that's not necessarily a bad thing when we're talking about being a senator in a swing state. You can vote with your party in swing states. We see Rick Scott is a popular senator in Florida, and I'm sure PPT knows all about this because he's from Florida. Scott never votes against the Republican Party, but it's the rhetoric that matters. And when Ron Johnson comes out and he said today that climate change was, he swore, but he said it was illegitimate. You can, that's not a popular position to have today. And
Well,
he's in. Just give me a second here.
mhm.
Voters are not. 2016 Ron Johnson was a lot more populist and had suburban appeal to 2022 Ron Johnson, because Donald Trump, you said, American Prediction says OMG approval rating doesn't matter. Trump won with a low approval rating in 2016. He ran against Hillary Clinton, who had an
Also
even lower approval rating,
yeah.
may I remind you. And Donald Trump, when he won Wisconsin in 2016, he ran as a populist who had appeal to a lot of voting blocks that, passed Republicans like Mitt Romney did not. And that's why he did so much better than Mitt Romney. Ron Johnson, without Trump on the ballot, is going to have a much harder time getting rural voters out to vote for him, having working class voters out to vote on him. And at the same time, he's got the suburban swing, which is going to do, a 99% chance he does a lot worse in the wild counties than he did in 2016. So I do think, again, like I said, polling Wisconsin is atrocious. I wouldn't trust it. But what we have says Ron Johnson's not favored to win re-election. And based on what we're analyzing right now, he does not really have a ton of room to improve over 2016. And I do think that he's going to, as of right now, I think he has like a 55% chance of losing. Not saying he can't win, and I would never say that. I would say like Wisconsin, but I don't think that you can say that Ron Johnson's favored as of right now.
This is like a thing I disagree with you in this case. Like, I don't think that the approval ratings have as big of an impact. Especially when it's something like so niche, where like it's not as big of a poll, it's not as many polls, so sample size is not big. It's different, I guess. But I think that one of the things that we should discuss is we've seen in the last couple of years how polls have been off, and I think especially this far out, we shouldn't be, again, we can speculate using polls, but I think that it's not the big deciding factor. I think that, again, it's also another thing. We as like individuals, no one can make predictions this far out with like realistic, like 99.5% chance of winning. Not even the day before of an election you can do that, because it's just too many different factors. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. God knows, even in a year and a half. So I think that's one of the big things. When people are making, this is a great example. People are making 2020 predictions, and everyone's like, "Oh, Trump's gonna win because the economy is good," or "No, Trump's gonna lose because he has this rhetoric that no one likes." Well, no one knew what's gonna end up happening, and out of nowhere, we have this big pandemic that completely changed the state of the race. So I think that we have to be careful in a way when we predict elections and discuss. But I think it's important to look forward, but discuss that. UEP. Now, I want to see if you want to discuss the state of Florida. What do you think about Ron DeSantis and his political future?
All right. So someone just said UEP is going LTE mode. Okay. Okay. Let's get back on track. So Ron DeSantis being a, is a popular governor. I don't think he was popular a year ago at this time. I think that people's views of COVID has changed. Maybe a year ago, people were more friendly to lockdowns than they are now. And that has worked in the Republican Party's favor. Ron DeSantis is, I think he was according to some poll I saw, he was 12 points underwater in July of 2020. He's now, I think according to the same poll, he's favored by, I think, 55% of Floridians. And in the state that is a very, very a competitive state, that's good. And I don't think that the Democrats have a path to victory in the governor's race. I mean, we saw Joe Biden lose the state by 3%. And after looking back, I think everyone knew, with the exception of some people, most people knew that Joe Biden was going to lose Florida. And I think the Democrats know they're going to lose Florida in 2022. What I think they should be focusing on is not wasting a ton of money on defeating Ron DeSantis, because it's a waste of time. And, the Democrats, this isn't to say that they don't have candidates to run. I mean, Val Demings is, I think, already running a strong campaign in the Senate race against Marco Rubio. I think that could end up being close in the governor's race. We'll talk about that in a second. But Ron DeSantis is a popular governor who, even if he runs against Charlie Crist, who's a good candidate for the Democrats, would still probably win by, upwards of 5%. So I think DeSantis is pretty safe for right now. He's, and I've seen people on Twitter who say he's going to win by like 12. That's not, like, even if he has a 12% approval rating, it's just exactly. The Democrats, even if they're bad at winning elections in Florida, they still have a base they can rely on. They still have a base in Orlando. They still have a base in Tampa. They still have a base in Tallahassee. Still have a base in Jacksonville. That's actually, there's some parts of Florida actually trending blue, like Jacksonville, for example. But the reason the Democrats are shedding in Florida, and I know that, and I see PPT wants to chime in, and I'll let him in a second. But Democrats just can't win Florida anymore because they are performing so badly with Hispanics. And it's a mix of, I think, the Democrats being clueless and not knowing how to run campaigns with Hispanics. And I think it's also the Democratic Party of Florida just being completely incompetent. They have a new leader, Manny Diaz, who's not, I think he's the former mayor of Miami. He's not a bad leader, but the Florida Democratic Party is in debt, and they have not really won a statewide race that actually matters since 2012. Now, and I do want to debunk something for a second. So someone in the chat says Florida really isn't competitive anymore. Florida is a red state now. So, that's not the case either. And I'm glad that we're having this conversation, because people, here's an example. No one is saying that Texas is a safe red state. Joe Biden lost by 6%. People are saying, it's going to be competitive by 2024. It could flip in 2028. Why are we not saying that about Florida when Joe Biden lost it by half the amount he lost Texas by? It's not because people want to ignore Florida. It's because people have this mentality that because Florida's been so heartbreaking for Democrats in both 2018 and 2020 that, it just somehow magically can't go blue again. That's not true. What I am saying, however, is that 2022 is going to be bad for Democrats in Florida because you have two very strong Republican incumbents. 2024, I think the Democrats actually have a shot at the presidential level, probably not in the Senate race. And, in the future, who knows? Because when areas like Jacksonville and Tampa are trending blue and growing, they can, 20 years from now, we could see completely different coalitions. Coalitions change. People are extrapolating trends. We could easily see the Democrats be focusing their campaigns on Pinellas County instead of Miami-Dade County. Because Pinellas County, Donald Trump did not flip any counties in Florida in 2020, but he won by more. And even if Miami-Dade flips in 10 years from now, which it could, it doesn't matter if Democrats continue their improvements in, Duval County or Pinellas County or Orange County. So just to put that out there. That being said, Florida is leaning Republican for right now. I'll let PPT talk because I know he's dying to talk about his home state.
Yeah, so this is something that a lot of people don't really take a look at. I mean, in the immediate future, Florida is a red state, right? In the immediate future, I would say for the next 4 years. Now, as far as going further than that goes, anyone's game, because here's what we have to understand about Florida. First of all, a couple things. Miami-Dade, I think the Republicans are going to reach their peak, because we must remember, I think a lot of people have this misconception that Miami-Dade is just all Latinos. That's not the case. Miami-Dade County is a big part Latino, and then you also have, some white voters, but another big group in Miami-Dade County who is, growing quickly is African-American vote. Those votes are going to go regardless for the Democrats in most cases. The Republicans could be gaining with some minorities and stuff, but then we also have to acknowledge another thing. They're losing amongst white voters The Republican is no longer, while they'd be gaining a little bit more with minority voters, they're going down a little bit with the white voters. So that's something we should think about. The other thing is that, Miami-Dade County could be trending red or whatever, but you still have to analyze the fact that Tampa is a super fast growing city with a big amount of college educated voters, influxing. I saw an article about real estate, because real estate is moving very rapidly in the state of Florida. It's a booming sector of the economy, and Tampa is the fastest moving real estate market in the state of Florida, meaning people from up north are moving to Tampa. A lot of those people are Democrats. We cannot undermine that. And then the other thing is, as the Republican Party in Miami-Dade, or not Miami-Dade, in the whole state of Florida starts heavily focusing on Latinos in Miami-Dade, there is going to be opening of a niche for the Democrats to come in with someone like a Nikki Fried or a Gwen Grisham, Gwen Graham. Oops, they could come in with Gwen Graham, and they could go up and do very well up north. And I think those are all different possibilities that people do not think about. And in Florida's a whole different ballgame at a presidential level. If they want someone from up north, if a northern Republican, like by Midwest region Republican or someone like that, does run for president in the future, Florida's not going to be as safe as it is. And I think those are a couple points we really have to think about. UEP?
Right, and again, I agree with that. I would say that Florida, like you said, right now, likely to stay with the Republican Party. Probably 90% chance DeSantis wins re-election, 85% chance Rubio wins re-election. But in the future, if the trends continue, Florida could be competitive again, just with completely different coalitions. Because coalitions do change. So, yeah. Now, let's look at the chat. LT fans are so funny. I don't know. Is the chat is APW me to be an LTE fan? I don't know. Yeah, this is a good point. Calling Florida safe, right, is like calling New Hampshire and Minnesota safety. New Hampshire and Minnesota have very Democratic leans, and Democrats do very well in elections there, but they're not safe. And the other party can win occasionally. Let's see, what else do we have? Eric Adams. Yeah, we talked about Eric Adams earlier.
New York Times actually just called her sick officially.
They just did? All right, good.
Yeah, I got an email on my phone.
All right, good. Florida and Texas are moving in different directions. Yeah, that's definitely a true statement. But I think that we see similar things in these states. Even though Texas is trending blue and Florida's, I guess, shifting to the right, we do see similar things. Because in Texas, the reason that Donald Trump didn't lose the state, or didn't do as I'm pretty. I did pretty well in Texas in 2020. It was one of my better states. But the reason that Donald Trump overperformed a lot of people's expectations in Texas is because of the Hispanic vote. And it's because he did so well with Hispanics in the Rio Grande Valley, in areas like Laredo, El Paso, McAllen. And, even in special elections, the Republicans picked up the McAllen mayoral race. It was a very low turnout race. We shouldn't extrapolate the results. But it was a race that the Republican Party did do well in. Now, the reason that Texas is shifting blue is because the suburbs have more people than the Rio Grande Valley, and because they are areas that have been shifting to the left more so than some of these areas that are shifting right, if that makes sense. Tarrant County was a historic flip for Joe Biden. He became the first Democrat to win at the presidential level since 1964. Collin and Denton County, which are Trump plus 5 counties. George Bush won those counties by like 40%. Harris County, which is the home of Houston and its suburbs, went to Joe Biden by I think 19 or 18%. Someone fact check me on that. But George W. Bush won a ton of suburban counties that Joe Biden won easily in 2020. So the coalitions in Texas and Florida are shifting, but in the same way. Now, just to briefly move on, and I'll let PPT touch up on Florida and Texas as well, because I'm sure he has a lot about that as well. Obviously, as a resident of Florida. Someone in the chat says that Minnesota and New Hampshire are trending red, and I want to talk about that for a second. So I don't think that either of those really trending anyway. If anything, they're trending blue, and I'll tell you why. So Minnesota, let's look at Minnesota. Minnesota was a state that I underestimated Joe Biden in 2020. I didn't do that for a ton of states. I think only like 15 or 20 states I underestimated Joe Biden. Minnesota was one of those because I had him winning by 4%. He won it by over 7%. So Minnesota was a very strong state for Joe Biden, and it's because, yeah. And by the way, Raghav, I totally agree. Florida, PBT actually is Florida man. He's confessed it to me many times, but it's okay because we're on Zoom and not because we are in real life. But whatever. So Minnesota. The suburbs of Minneapolis are shifting the states to the left. There's this misconception that because Donald Trump did so well in Minnesota in 2016 that it's going to be this swing state in the future that's going to be a toss up. That's like me. That's like me in 2009 saying, or no, in 2013 saying, okay, Indiana, Obama won it by a point in 2008. Then it reverted back to normal form. It was a likely Republican state in 2012. That means Indiana's trending red because the Democrat won a crazy election there. No, Donald Trump and Barack Obama had huge overperformances in certain states. And, to their credit, they did well in those states. I'm not taking away from that. But it doesn't mean that other people in their party are going to be able to replicate it. In Minnesota, with the Minneapolis suburbs shifting the state to the left, I don't think Republicans have a path to victory there, realistically speaking. Now, it's not competitive. It's still going to be single-digit state for a while. And it's still going to stay, Republicans could invest in a Senate race there in the future, assuming it's not Amy Klobuchar because she's ridiculously popular there. 2024, the state could easily fall below 5%. But saying that it's shifting Republican when we just saw a minor shift in 2016 does not make a ton of sense to me. Same in New Hampshire, same thing goes. Donald Trump did very well there in 2016, and Chris Sununu is a popular governor. Doesn't mean the state's shifting left. And New Hampshire is actually a state that's getting worse for Republicans because they've been losing a lot with college-educated voters. And New Hampshire is full of white college-educated voters that are trending towards the Democrats. So, yeah.
You made great points right there, and I think a lot of things comes out. But I'm gonna go back to Texas for a minute. The big thing with Texas, I really think we should discuss is that the reality of Texas is that the Democrats are going to have to. They're going to be stuck in a place of limbo because there's going to be a certain point when the suburbs just stop going for them. Like not going for them, but it's not going to be gaining as many marches as it once was. I think that moving forward, I think we only have around 4 years left for the suburbs to completely, turn Democratic. And then with the upset of the margins of the votes down south in Rio Grande Valley, that's really going to help them out. But that is, why I think Texas is going to be in a state of limbo. If anything, it's going to end up shifting by around 2 or 3 points max. I mean, it's still going to be narrow. I mean, narrow for Texas, Texas-wise, because Texas has been a state that for the longest of time has been solidly Republican. And, it's a big shift. Now, I want to discuss some things that I've seen here in the chat. What AP was saying about Minnesota and New Hampshire, they're trending red. I don't think that's really the case. With like you were saying, it's not about little trends and it's not about house races. I think it really comes down to where the general where the votes stand. And I think in the state of Minnesota, you're looking at conservative rural, moderate suburbs, and then urban areas that are liberal, some of the most liberal in the country. That's where the whole Black Lives Matter movement, came to light, and then that became its whole, big influential part in the election. Now, as for New Hampshire, I've always said it like this. New Hampshire it's a small town state. It's just a state full of small towns that is pretty much just made up of college-educated voters, which means, what does that mean for that? That the Democrats are just going to have a better time winning there because of the biases and all the, quote-unquote indoctrination in U.S. colleges and universities. And I think moving forward is actually an issue that I think a lot of Republicans should focus on. And to a certain extent, they're already starting to really to cover in a way, and that is the youth campuses and college campuses. Turning Point USA is the big pinpoint for that. that pretty much they've been able to create and establish a base for their presence in U.S. colleges and universities. Because if they don't do that, what's going to end up happening? The Democrats are going to take college-educated voters, or a big chunk of them, for the rest of time, and then with that, you're pretty much just producing more and more Democrats. So for the Republicans, it's very important to start building more youth movement in U.S. colleges and universities, especially when going to college is one of the most popular options in the U.S. As an incoming high schooler, I've started like the college process and meeting with my advisors and all those, and that politically is such a big tool. So UP, what do you think about the movements on U.S. campuses and colleges?
So, I mean, me and PPT have had our debates about this where we haven't live streamed it. This is kind of an opinion-based question. I mean, I don't like to call it indoctrination. I do think that, the majority of college professors are definitely liberal, but I don't think that they're indoctrinating students. I think that, we've seen college-educated people become more democratic. You can either think that, for some reason that professors are indoctrinating children or giving them, I guess, left-wing biased lessons. That's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is just, as you become more educated with the world, you become more progressive. I'm not saying one of those is right and one of those is wrong, but those are the two main opinions. I don't think we should talk too much about it because it's very hard for me to talk about without sounding too biased. So, yeah.
Right. But I'm talking more at a political level. How important is it for the future of the GOP to start building movements like the Democrats have in U.S. colleges and campuses? Because I think at the end of the day, one of the big reasons why college towns are really helping out Democrats is because they have that base, student organizations or things like that. So do you think politically that's a good strategy?
Well, in my opinion, it absolutely is because for both parties, and if the GOP wants, for there to be more conservative professors, I hate to see college politicized, but it is good politics for them, and I think that if they want that to be a part of part of what they're doing for the future, politically speaking, they should do that. It would be better politics for them, but I don't think that colleges are as big of a part of education as I think you do, but that's just my opinion.
Right. Like the reason I mentioned this was more because of the political reasons. And for the GOP moving forward, they are going to have to face with a younger generation that just is by certain means just more progressive. So I think it's something that's going to be very interesting to see. And I think moving forward, the GOP have to do something about that because eventually you're gonna end up seeing a party that will eventually or either die out or just become liberal with the movement. But that's more getting into alternative history, what could happen in the future, and I don't want to go into that rabbit hole. Let me see if there is anything else we can is there anything else in the chat? UEP, did you see DeSantis's old bill or new bill about teachers?
The banning of critical race theory being taught.
Yeah.
I saw it. I don't know. I think you know a little more about it than I do. So if you want to step out and talk about it first, you can do that.
Well, I actually saw this, and I think that in a way it's a positive thing, but then I think at the end of the day it really does nothing because it's just a power move to say when Ron DeSantis eventually runs for president, say, "Oh, look what I did," so he can win a primary. I think that first of all, it's maybe a little bit out of the government's stepping stone, and I've talked about this in many other instances. That the different political parties just want to get more power, and this is a way to do it. Now, I really think that the a lot of things people are saying, oh, it's fascism or things like that. I don't think it's that serious. It's a little disturbing, but I don't think it's that bad.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Someone says purple is a Republican, UEB is a Democrat. Why do you guys think that? I mean, well, I think both of us do a pretty. I mean,
Yeah.
I think I try to do a pretty good job of remaining impartial, and I think PPT does a good job. We'll run DeSantis one for re-election 2024. I mean, his re-election for governor is 2022, but I mean, running for president, I think he's the GOP's best candidate. I think he's the ideal Venn diagram because I think he's the only one who can appeal to both suburban voters who voted for Mitt Romney but didn't vote for Donald Trump, and rural and working class voters that have really come out for the Republican Party in the past 4 years. So, whether it's president or governor, I think he's in good shape no matter what.
Right. I think he's talking more about getting reelected in 2020, and I mean, it's hard to tell this for where the country's going to be, but I think it's likely that he would. I mean, although, hear me out. Maybe, I don't know if this is a trend we could start seeing, that presidents just do not get reelected anymore. That it's going to be one term until that streak is broken. Do you think that's actually something that could happen with how polarized the country has become? And pretty much independence.
We could see that. Like, we could just see like close elections where we have 48% for the Democrats, 48% for the Republicans at the popular vote level, maybe in swing states, and then the other 2% third party, 2% independents who just get mad every election or just sick of the incumbent. So it's possible we see that.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see that that future trend, because I think it's something that we could certainly see just based on what's happened in the last couple of years. I think that we definitely can tell that the country is more polarized than ever, and we're gonna discuss that in a couple of upcoming projects that me and UEP have, and you guys might get a wind of that rather later on.
I'm excited.
Yeah, we're gonna discuss that more into depth in the future, and when the time is right, you guys will know what we're talking about. So yeah. UEP, do you think we should call it here and say bye to our viewers?
Yeah, I think open live for around 57 minutes, and I have to go soon anyways. But I'll finish up what I was saying, and I'll let PPT close it out. Thank you guys for coming. This was a fun stream. The hour went by pretty fast, and I really enjoyed this. It was fun. Thank you guys for coming, and be sure to put more questions in the chat that are politically related. Thank you to everyone who liked the video. I think as of right now we have 24 likes, 13 likes, 13 dislikes. So thanks to everyone who liked the video. Put in comments in the chat. We really appreciate it. So yeah.
I mean, thank you guys so much for watching, and I really hope you guys enjoyed the video. If so, please give it a huge thumbs up, like, subscribe, turn on post notifications to be up to date with our latest content. Again, see you on the next episode of Unbiased and Purple Podcast.